Thank you everyone for coming to my TED Talk. So this is going to be probably a little bit different from most of the other content that you've been hearing today. I have absolutely no code on any of these slides. Okay, maybe one or two, but nothing hectic. Just wanted to share a little bit of my story and why I, as a software developer, decided to get into UX. So I'm going to give you my 5 reasons why I decided to do that. Hopefully no fire alarms go off during the course of the session. If it does, it's okay. I'm sure we'll make a plan about that. So thank you for the introduction. Yes, my name is Chris, and I am a blank at DVT, and I make software for humans. So that's really my tagline. I don't really believe that much in job titles. I think they're pretty much bullshit. We just use them to impress people a lot of the time. The other reason why it's blank is because I don't really actually know what my title is at this very moment in time. Things are changing a little bit at DVT. But I've always had this thing about, as a software developer, the reason why we do what we do is probably to actually solve a problem that people in the world are facing. We don't just create software for the sake of making software, although it's really fun and we probably would do that. But most of the time, we're doing solutions because it's useful. It's gonna hopefully make a change, make an improvement to something that's happening in the world. So that's why I believe in making software for humans, and that's also one of the reasons that brought me onto the UX side of things. So just a word of warning: if you want to follow the same kind of path that I've followed and get more into the design side of things. One thing which might happen to you is that people might say, oh, cool, you code and you can design as well. Well, you're a unicorn. You might hear this, it might irritate you as it did with me, and you might end up feeling, something like this, where you wish that you were a unicorn because then you could just impale that person. Maybe you don't mind being referred to as a unicorn. Props to you. If that's your thing, then go for it. A little bit of my background, how I got into dev as a young kid. This was my first programming language. Is it familiar to anyone out there? Anyone know of GW Basic? It did evolve and become Visual Basic and other things like that, which were still pretty terrible. But I had a lot of fun playing around with computers as a kid. So I would go to the library and take books out of the library, and they had some basic code in them, which I would type in with mixed results. Sometimes the code would actually do something that it was supposed to do. Other times it wouldn't, and I would have to try and figure out exactly why or why not. And the programs looked kind of something like this. Interesting thing about BASIC is that the numbers that you see down the left-hand side, they are actually not put in for you by your editor or IDE or whatever you're using. Those are actually part of the source code. So you had to actually number your lines. Very bad for refactoring. If you wanted to add another line in between, say 30 and 40, that would become line 35 or 30-something. Interesting way to do that. I'm really glad that they dropped that. So this was my first experience of programming. While that was going on, I was also playing around with this whole world of multimedia, which was, we had a CD-ROM drive, and then we had color monitors, and I started playing around with all this graphics, and I was into music as well, so I liked playing around with sound recording programs like Cakewalk, which is here. At the same time as being that techie coding kid, I was also interested in the experience side of things and a little bit of creativity that went along with that. I never knew that there was anything called UX, but along the way, somehow within, I was probably still in primary school, I heard someone refer to software or the experience of using a computer as being user-friendly. And that word always stuck with me. Along the way and later in life when I discovered experience design and it became a more formal methodology, I always related it back to that concept of the software being quite user-friendly. So that helped. So my backstory, just quickly to buzz you through my career as a software developer. So back in when I finished high school, I went straight into a software company, and it belonged to a friend of mine. It was a startup, and I got to play around with a whole lot of web technologies and learned, how to create a form of web apps. And yesterday, I was coming back from Cape Town, and Robert, the DevConf organizer, was saying, we don't want anyone to be a jerk. Don't make fun of people who code PHP. And that was me. I was a PHP guy. That was my first serious language. So GW Basic, yeah, that got me started. But PHP, I actually got paid to write PHP code as a 18, 19-year-old developer. And I played around with those kind of technologies, wrote some SQL. So we were pretty much full stack, even though that wasn't even a word back then. There was no such thing, but we pretty much did everything. I mean, we designed, we coded, we did the database queries, we had to index the queries. The code base was horrible, but somehow it still made the company money. And I think the startup actually turned into a successful company, which is probably still running that same shitty source code with tons of duplication and very hard to refactor. It worked. After about a few years of doing that, decided that I wanted to do something a little bit more fun. I also became a student around this time, so while I was studying, I part-time went to work at a marketing agency. Worked on some more PHP stuff, some Facebook development, and also started getting more into JavaScript. And I got exposed to things like version control, which made managing our code base that much better. Web services became a popular thing, and we caught onto that. And I also started playing around with other languages like C++, Python, and those kind of things. And then Java. Java became my thing for the next phase of my career when I started doing a little bit more consulting. I joined DVT around this time, and I decided I wanted to be an Android developer because mobile seemed really cool. And then this is around the time where I think for myself, even though I wouldn't really say I was an amazing software developer, I started paying more attention to things like solid and clean code, and I fell in love with TDD. Anyone a fan of Kent Beck? Guys like Uncle Bob, these were like influential for me at this time. So I really started getting into that whole XP way of writing software, making sure everything was beautiful, and couldn't be. It was pretty much, I was happy with my level of coding at this stage. I'd come a long way, but now I felt like a real developer. Along the way, I had a couple of quotes of my experience of design pulling throughout my career. Back in the startup days, I think I said to my boss the one day, I want to be the UI guy. I just want to create awesome user interfaces for people. So I already had that pull towards the front end, towards how people experience the software that I was putting out. And then, in the agency days, that's when we actually had a little bit of a awakening around UX. I now worked with UX people at the agency, and we were creating wireframes. We were actually putting a little bit of thoughts and planning into the UI. It wasn't just okay, the devs will figure it out. I mean, let's write some code, and whatever comes out, let's hope that it's usable. And then in the corporate world, I felt that some of this responsibility had been taken away from me because now I wasn't even involved that much in the wireframing. I was pretty much given full screen mockups and just told, well, it needs to look exactly like that, just make it happen. So, from the background of having had a lot of input into how the user experience would be, to almost having that all taken away from me, I felt that there was probably something missing, and I think this was also something that pushed me more in this direction. So along that same time scale from around 2003 when I started working to 13 years later when I kind of transitioned, So I had a lot more responsibilities and a lot more to do with the software that we were creating at that stage, where by the time 3 years ago happened, it felt like a lot less. And as I said, that left a little bit of a gap for me. In that same time period, there were a lot of things that happened with regards to design becoming a much more recognized discipline. So you have, the situation where maybe back in the day, you could have just been a web designer. Now you can be any kind of designer that you can possibly think of, including Unicorn. Yes, Unicorn is still there. Now it's a vast discipline with a lot of sub-disciplines, and you can really specialize when it comes to UX. It also means that we get a lot more recognition when we say, I'm a UX person. Clients are less likely to give you the confused face, the really, why do we need that? We've got developers, they can just do that. So just to define UX a little bit more, because we haven't done that yet, and then I'll get into those 5 reasons. Please don't feel insulted by my definition of programming, but I decided I wanted to play around with a little bit of terminology. So we didn't call ourselves software developers, we were just the programmers. So I thought, well, what is the essence of programming? Problem solving, right? This is what we do all day. We struggle, we Google things, we go to Stack Overflow, copy and paste. But at the end of the day, programming is kind of getting the computer to do what I want it to do. Okay, very simplified definition. I know this is really trivializing the activity of what we do as developers. And this is actually something which I really enjoyed. I mean, being a software developer, it was great. I would get into the flow. I would be solving problems and getting that little high every time something went right and my code compiled and my test passed. So computers were very central in the activity of programming. When I was thinking about user experience and what is user experience in this kind of thinking, I thought maybe this, just getting the computer to do what I want it to do, I need to take a step back and kind of figure out first the what. So instead of just focusing on the how, let's look at maybe putting a little bit of planning into it and thinking how are people going to respond to it. So just rather than just diving into the code. So I'd rather figure out what. Then I thought, no, that definition's pretty crap. So I refined it a bit for myself, and I realized that user experience has the word user in it for a reason. It doesn't matter about me, actually, because as a software developer, I'm not going to be the one that has to use the software. So if for me to design this is probably not, I can't just do it from what's in my own head. I actually need to include this concept of the user. So that was a little light bulb moment. And then I thought, no, that's not really a great definition yet, because users actually don't care that much about computers or software. Kind of a strange concept, but if you think about it, people don't care about software. Okay, we really do, because this is what we do, this is what we're passionate about. People, at the end of the day, they use software as the means to an end. They all want to get something done in life. They want to order an Uber to go somewhere. They want to get their shopping delivered. They want to make a payment to something or a business or an individual. The software is a means to an end. So the software needs to get out of the way. People don't really care about computers as much as we like to think that they do, and as much as we care about computers as tech guys, technical people. So I decided to take computer out of that definition to just figuring out what the user wants. Also went online because just to check myself, because I'm making all this stuff up, I decided, no, I want to actually go and see what's out there in terms of definitions. And then I found this lady. She's the head of design at Facebook. very smart lady and gives amazing talks. So she says, to design products is to understand what needs, wants, or problems that people have, and construct something that will help solve that problem. So this is where design comes in, to be focused on the activity of design. So that for me helped improve my definition, and now, just to add impact, have a beautiful background image. I thought maybe, applying design to solve people's problems would be a good definition for UX. So just before I get into my reasons, you don't have to go full unicorn. The thing is, with understanding design and the concepts behind user experience, is that it's going to help you no matter what. If you're a developer and you want to stay a developer, that's awesome. You can just absolutely benefit by having a deeper understanding of all this terminology that the designers around you are using. And a lot of the design functions might fall on you as well if you don't have designers in your team. It'll help either way. The other points on this is that perhaps you know people that are interested in this field. Maybe you have younger siblings, cousins, or your own children that don't really know what it is they want to do in life, what they want to study. So look at design, educate yourself more on user experience, and if it sounds like a cool career that would be suitable for those people, you can advise them as well. Okay, so my reasons. I felt it was important. I realized how important user experience is in software. And if I wasn't seeing that it was happening around me, I was probably going to have to pick that up myself. So one of the things I've noticed about myself is that if there is a job, or I see there's a gap, job that needs to be done, no one else is doing it, it's probably going to end up being me. I'll probably pick that up and make it happen. So I felt that it was important. This is one of the reasons why. Just to quickly get into a little bit of concepts, has anyone heard of this phrase? I think Liz actually mentioned it in her really good talk, which did get interrupted by the fire alarm earlier. Human-centered design. Anyone familiar? Yeah? I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory. So everything revolves around the user, and this is what we were saying, the difference between me, the programmer, and the user that's building the software. Let's try and put our whole process around that person, understanding what they're going through, the empathy part, defining, prototyping something, and then testing that prototype. So this is our kind of mantra, this is what we believe in, and this is what we always say to remind ourselves: the user is not me, I'm not the user. So that's why we do human-centered design as UX people. Okay. The other thing about user experience is that you kind of get pulled in different directions. So we use this nice diagram to show that we kind of sit in the middle of these different forces that are playing out. But the one that we should be advocating for and caring about the most is the user needs. That's why we focus on user experience. But the business will always bring us their ideas. After all, they're the ones that are paying us. They want things to be a certain way, and we have to tell them why it maybe could be different. Maybe the design that they brought to us isn't the best. And obviously technology. So what we see as very important is that the user experience and technical team, as in the developers, should be working hand in hand the whole time. Okay. I realized that I actually had skills already. So as a developer, as we said, what we do all day, we were solving problems. Maybe we're solving more of the machine problems, but in essence, you still need to have a really good grip on analytical thought. Just really, you can apply that same mindset to whatever problem solving maybe for people as well. It's using creativity. Creativity is definitely a part of coding, and with design, it's some of it does require innovation. But what a lot of people don't realize is that design is actually a lot more structured than we like to think. There's always patterns and conventions that we have to follow. Excuse me. So just on the patterns on conventions, these are some of the platforms that we develop for at DVT where I work. Who does mobile development of any form? Yeah, who does a lot of more web-based stuff? And any other platforms that people are developing for? I don't know what else there is these days. So we're very fortunate because we have very good guidelines. Android, you're going to, as soon as you start looking at documentation, you're going to come across material. The material guidelines, this is advisable. iOS has their own thing for all iPhone and iPad type of apps. We use this thing called Apple's Human Interface Guidelines. When it comes to web, no one owns the web. So we end up kind of being in a little bit more of a difficult situation where there's a lot more freedom, and that actually makes our job a lot harder. So a very cool thing which we've come across in the last couple of years is design systems. Anyone familiar with design systems? Okay, so pretty cool, worth checking out, especially if you are building software for the web, because there are companies out there that have published these really cool standards and style guides, which can be very helpful. They've made them available for free. It's like the open source of design. So why not go and just go steal, reuse whatever you want, maybe modify it a little bit, make it your own. So these are just a few really cool examples of design systems, but there are lots more out there. You can even go and develop your own design system if that's something that your organization has a lot of designers and you want to pull some consistency into the process. You can actually go and create one. I wanted to grow, so I had been doing dev, as I said, for about 12, 13 years. I was kind of getting a little bit satisfied for myself that I was getting better as a dev, and I felt like maybe I could use a new challenge. Maybe there's something that I could do, add to my skill set, and reach a new achievement for myself personally. Push myself in a new direction. So I had to really figure out what it is that I didn't know so that I could go and seek out ways to learn that stuff. Especially a big one for me was the research side of user experience. Like we said, the human-centered design process looks at the person using the software. And how do we actually get to understand what that person's going through, how they're experiencing the software? You'll hear UX people all the time speaking about empathy. And what are the methods that we use to build empathy? Well, it's all these things. It's diary studies. It's actually interviewing someone, observing them either in a controlled environment, like a user experience lab, or even in a contextual inquiry, wherever they actually work or wherever they operate from as well. So this was a bit of a learning curve for me. I didn't realize at first how important this all was. And then a few more tools that really stood out for me, and I just wanted to introduce a couple of them. With things like personas. Who's used a persona before, or maybe has been involved in developing a persona before? A few people. So in a nutshell, a persona is just taking that user research, all of the investigation that you've done, distilling it down into a fictional character, and using that character to remind yourself that you're not designing for yourself, but it represents your user base. Journeys, journey mapping, very useful. So you take your persona and you put them into a situation, and you try and understand what they're actually going through while, trying to achieve a certain task. So it's really just another reference which the whole team can use to remind themselves of the context. Prototyping and user testing, pretty much self-explanatory. In the interest of time, I'm not really going to explain those too deeply. But just to say, if you're not doing user testing, especially with prototypes or with your finished versions of your software, I would really recommend pushing for something like that. So this is just a picture of someone doing a usability testing. Again, this is something that we had to learn, the techniques of testing usability of a product, putting different versions together, seeing which one people responded to better, concepts like A/B testing, right? Reason number 4. So at DVT a couple of years ago, I got involved with a little bit more mentorship and helping junior developers with building up their skills. And we realized that, we didn't actually have any designers in the office. We had 1 or 2 that were out at clients working on projects. But we realized that we had a need, so it was a little bit too much to ask of our grads to actually go and do their own UIs and screen designs when they were busy following a whole curriculum of clean code and all software engineering practices. So like I said, my fatal flaw is if something isn't being done, I'll probably do it myself. So I just took out my pen and paper and I started scribbling things that resembled wireframes for the grads to be able to follow. So this was also cool because it helped me to think through a little bit in a little bit more detail how the software should be working. We call this interaction design, putting together screens like this. And I also taught myself tools such as this one, which is called Axure. And this was also cool because it took those paper sketches and wireframes and it made it into something more interactive and something that could be followed closely by the developers. Even though it wasn't really a fully pixel perfect design, it was still a lot better than just suggesting something and letting people play around and come up with something. Just wanted to put this out there, see what the response is. Who believes that everyone is a UX designer? Strange or not? Who says yes? Who says no? Separation of concerns. So there is a whole debate. I mean, it's one of those very philosophical questions where there isn't really a right or wrong answer. Depends on how you want to look at it. But it's a question that I like because it forces us to think, what is my role within the software team? And what impact is the work that I do actually having on the product at the end of the day and the experience that the user has? So whether I'm a back-end person and I'm just, I just write the services, I might not think that I'm having that much impact on UX. But actually in the way that we code and the way that we architect our systems, that all actually has an impact on things like performance. Your database your queries. If your queries are running slow, well, it's going to make your whole app run really slow. So if you want to think about this question a little bit more and get into the debate, this guy is, I think he's the one that kind of keeps pushing people into, yeah, everyone is a UX designer. If you don't agree with him, that's cool. Maybe go onto Twitter and argue with him. And then my last reason, as I said, we didn't really have much of a design competency at DVT a couple of years ago. And so thinking about, maybe this should change. Why are we not doing this? Why are we relying too much on other companies, other agencies, and people who are really good at UX to provide this for us whenever we really need it? Why don't we just start something? So that's why I thought I need to upskill myself, because there's no point in me going and being, the leader of UX in DVT and really pushing everyone to say, hey, we need to hire some really good designers, and not really knowing for myself and not being able to really get the message across about why design is important. I needed to be somehow, some form of maybe an expert in the field. Okay, so those are my 5 reasons. If you maybe thinking of doing something similar to what I've done with my journey, I can give you a little bit of tips from my side about how to do this. The way that I did it was I taught myself for free. I did not go on a course. I did pretty much online research. I believe that these days you can teach yourself almost anything just from YouTube, or going and researching things online. So these are some of the avenues that you might want to take. I don't know if the ZA Tech Slack community is still going strong, but when I last checked, it was. So if you're not aware of that, maybe go check that out. There's so much content online. It's ridiculous. If you just start Googling UX or any of the user research or the concept that I spoke about a second ago, then you'll just go down a rabbit hole and read all day about UX and really get into the mindset. If you don't like to learn for free online and spending money is more your thing, then also you can learn for not free, which is a strange sentence. But we use Interaction Design Foundation, which is a really good platform. There is a course that's offered through UCT, which is, I think, a 10-week course if you want to get into UX. And we also recommend this for people that come to us, like graphic designers, those kind of people that maybe have some of the skills but need to just flesh that out a bit. Go and get a formal qualification. It could help, could be a cool thing to add to your CV if you want to. You should probably go and follow some humans on the internet. So I already mentioned, I think, Jared Spool and Julie from Facebook. Don Norman, he's regarded as the person who pretty much invented the term user experience. So probably worth listening to. Gina, she's really into design systems. So she organizes a conference called Clarity, which is all about that. And her name on Twitter, I think, is Crazy Witch Asian, which is kind of fun. And Alan Cooper, yeah, I think he's got some good ideas too. If you like to read, you can read books. I really like this book, the one on the left. It's called Lean UX. If you're doing Scrum, hands up if you're doing Scrum. So Lean and Agile kind of play nicely together. A lot of the same principles go into it. Lean UX is really a way of bringing the techniques of design more into the sprint, getting that close collaboration, doing the UX just in time. Don't do too much big design up front, as they say. Don Norman, I just mentioned him now. He wrote a book called The Design of Everyday Things. He is famous for Norman doors, which Liz mentioned in her talk earlier, which I thought was really cool. So he extends it to more than just technology, but usability in everyday life as well. I actually like to learn from podcasts. If you have a long commute to work, this is great. Don't listen to 94.7 or whatever other rubbish is on commercial radio with all the ads. Rather go and download some podcasts and get smarter while you're driving to work. These are some of the ones that I like. You can probably go and find some others as well. Service design, just if anyone isn't familiar with service design, is another branch similar to user experience, or taking it just a little bit broader into the whole across touch points and across channels, not just looking at a single product. Very cool. And then seeing as everyone is here at a conference, I thought maybe you are the type of people who go to conferences. So if you do want to, there are lots of good events to go to with design. So you can check out some of these. UX South Africa is pretty cool. Pixel Up Conference is cool. And IDF also have local events that they run. So there's meetups, which you can go to for free, and meetups are great. But ignoring all of that, I think the best way to actually learn, if you're really serious about wanting to become a designer, is to go and get yourself a project. Because, after all, we learn by doing. Theory is great and all. Listening to people talk about stuff is cool. But when you're actually doing it, that's when you figure out the hard stuff. So this is a project that I got myself involved with. We had an opportunity to do a mobile app for this organization called the Reserve Bank. And I put myself forward, just nominated myself, and I said, well, I would like to be the UX person on this project. Please DVT if you don't mind. They said, it's fine. So I said, thank you very much. And I went and learned a whole lot about mobile UX and UI designing for Android and iOS and Windows Phone, but then that whole thing went away. It was just like a waste. Okay. So what I found was the skills that we need when it comes to design, an evolution from dev into design. We first need some practical skills. Now, some people actually refer to these as hard skills and soft skills. When it comes to people skills, I actually think those ones are the hard skills, so that's why I don't really like the word soft skills. So I call these easy skills and hard skills. Practical skills, anyone can pretty much pick this up. You just have to get to know a few maybe prototyping tools. You don't really have to be a whiz with Photoshop and visual design, being able to do illustration and icon design. That's not, that's a small part of what user experience is. Just on the practical skills, something fun for now. This is a cool game that we found. People have been playing it and commenting on Slack about how they're doing on here. It's called Can't Unsee. So once you see something, I guess you can't go back. Which one looks better? Just like, let's take a quick poll. Shout out which one, left or right. You like the one on the left? Oh, yes. Comic Sans is awesome, man. Okay, this is a real question. Left or right? Still like the one on the left. Cool. And then it tells you, yeah, that's the right answer. So if this is the kind of thing which you think could be fun, you can geek out with this online. Okay, last one. It's getting a little bit harder. What's wrong with the left one? Oh, the icon. Okay. Cool. No, you guys are great at this. Okay, you can all become UX designers. That's fine. So, and then as I said, the hard skills, the people skills. This was a real learning curve for me. And as a developer, we can actually afford to not be that great at these kind of things a lot of the time. As a designer, you don't have a chance. This is everything. So, like we covered, the empathy, going out, understanding the user, really getting good at listening. But then on the other side of that, being able to put your ideas across to someone and really sell that idea, really get them to buy into it, that is actually probably more important. Like they say, if you you are part of a development team, everyone needs to be on the same page. You can't have different people with different opinions. Let's try and get some alignment. So if you bring those insights back from the field, you have to be able to communicate that back to your team. And then critique. Critique is a hard one because we all like to get attached. So if I've poured sort of my heart and soul into designing something and I think it's really awesome, and then I bring it to the office and then someone tells me, yeah, I don't really like that. That can be hard. And there's definitely work to be done in becoming better at doing design reviews and design critique. So on the persuasion side, this guy's, I think I met him at Pixel Up conference last year. His name's Jonathan Corman, a really smart dude. He's also worth a follow on Twitter. This is his quote, that design communication is actually its own art. And if you don't communicate it, it doesn't get built. So remember, as a developer, you actually hold all of the power, because if you don't agree with your UX designer and you choose to ignore them, well, then all of their hard work just, it wouldn't really see the light of day. That's why we encourage people to work closely together. We use this as a device for collaboration between design and development. Not to say that development is completely rational and logical and methodical, and design is completely creative. That's why in the yin-yang you have sort of an element of each one within the other as well. But this is something that we use to remind ourselves that we keep each other in check. Okay, design is the one that's always pushing for the user's needs. The tech people are always pushing for what's feasible, what's possible, what's actually going to work, and not keep us busy for months on end just because we're trying to implement something crazy. So that's why we really recommend close collaboration between those. And any reasons why you shouldn't? Maybe why you should think twice about going more in a design direction. A couple of just drawbacks that I found, maybe challenges that could put some people off. So sometimes being a designer is hard because people don't really understand it. You're always having to justify, why should we spend more money on design? Or why should we actually go in and do all this user testing? Like, don't we actually just know how to create software? Isn't it obvious? So that's why, one word of warning I would say is that maybe prepare to feel a little bit less valued. Everyone understands why they need a developer. It's because they can't write the code themselves. But as a designer, they sometimes think, oh, I can do this myself. It doesn't matter. I don't need a designer. And then my last disclaimer is, I don't know if anyone watches this show. Who's this? Who's this person? Or the character in Suits? Yes. His name is Mike Ross. He is a lawyer, but he has no qualification at all. So he's a fake. And he's a really good lawyer, in fact. He's pretty much a genius. He has a photographic memory. And the reason that he wants to practice law, even though he doesn't have the law degree, is because he just wants to help people. He really cares deeply about his clients, and that's the reason why he does what he does. I tell you this story because if you want to do design and you actually care about solving problems for people, it doesn't really matter if you don't have the qualifications. To be honest, design is quite a new field. There's not a lot of people that are really that qualified, or are really can say, yeah, I'm an expert. I know a heck of a lot more than you about design. If you really believe in UX like I do, then you may just want to go and become a UX person and Don't even worry about imposter syndrome and those kind of things. All right. So I'm just going to leave time for a couple of questions. So this is my TLDR. The reason why this kind of started for me is I reminded myself that the software that Create is for the user and the person behind the screen. They don't really care that much about the software. They just want to get the job done and move on with their life. I already had a basis. I already had problem-solving abilities. I had convergent and divergent ways of being able to attack a problem. Creativity and logic. This is transferable straight into design. Soft skills are the hard skills. Don't forget that. That's gonna trip you up. And you don't have to go full unicorn. If you want to, you can. But what I really think is that if we educate ourselves about human-centered design, those kind of principles, it's going to make us better software developers and hopefully even make us better humans by learning these things. That's the whole talk. Don't know if anyone has any questions or maybe has any experiences, maybe just wants to share how it works at your company. Do you have UX people? Do you work closely with them? Any challenges? I'm open to either stories or questions. Okay. Question. Do we need a microphone or is it fine? Okay.
Just all here. Here we go. In your experience, what are the best practices when working with back-end developers?
Best practices for designers and back-end developers to work together?
Yeah, like in terms of handling the code base and what you guys do and what they do.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. I think it's so what we recommend is we don't want designers to go away and completely leave the developers alone, go and design something and then bring it back. That's just going to cause a lot of problems because if there's unforeseen things from a technical level, then we're going to have to go and do a lot of rework. So we like to, in the spirit of agile, we like to review each other's stuff as much as possible. So that's why we have things like sticky sessions where the designers can maybe go and do a couple of different options for a flow or for a screen or something, bring it to the developers and say, please give us your input on this. We can vote on different options and let's get a consensus from the team. Try and work together that way. Because if you, it's very bad to just bring something to your devs and go, well, this is the way it's going to work. They're going to tell you that's not going to be very efficient. It's going to take us 3 times longer just to build that the way you wanted it. Cool.
Just a comment on what you just said there. Do you not feel that then the best experience is then compromised with having to, you're getting the devs involvement and they say, this is going to be difficult to do. In your experience, how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, life involves compromise, I suppose. The thing is that your job as a UX person is to then push back, and if you really feel your developers are putting the user experience behind where it needs to be, just by saying, these are our technical constraints, this is the way it should work, you need to be strong enough, and that's why we said, have those people skills, and be able to bring them along with you and say, I really believe that this is detrimental, so open up your mind a little bit to doing it this way. Another good way to do that is by inviting them along to that the testing sessions. So they're not going to believe you if you just tell them, but they probably would believe you a lot more if they're in that usability testing session and they actually see the user going, this is easy to understand, this one's not really. That could be a cool thing to do. Why not? There was a question here. Yeah?
Hold on,
minutes.
There's no right or wrong answer. Do you think everybody's a UX designer?
Good question.
Do I think? I kind of like that idea because it reminds me that everyone has a part to play in the software. So I would tend to be more on the yes. I think everyone should see themselves as having an impact on the design. So design is something that everyone actually does all the time that we don't realize. It's just a question of, do we do it intentionally? Do we try and get better at design? Do we learn the theory? Do we go through the traditional ways of design, or are we just doing it by accident? Are we actually just creating something and hope that it works? So I actually do think that everyone's a designer, not just of UX, but yeah, we design things every day. Cool. Okay. If there's no more questions, I think we are out of time, but thank you so much for having me at DevConf. It was fun. Cool.